giggles.
Way more than shits and giggles. We are coming together to do one of my favorite things, and that is to be critical thinkers about a tool that we both love.
Oh, I thought we were just going to be critical. Okay, that's
Well, I
fine.
almost said critical, and I was like, dial it down, Erin. It's like 3 seconds in.
We're just going to discuss. We're going to
Yes.
discuss with judgment, possibly.
Yeah, that's think this with cautious judgment.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I reached out to you because I wanted to have a good conversation about something in the Enneagram that gets a lot of attention. It gets a lot of like clout, whether deserved or not. But I wanted to have this conversation with somebody who could hold the nuance, who could be fair and also criticize, right? Who can just like hold the whole thing. And you were who came to mind because we have been doing this as a core foundation of our relationship for years.
The whole time, exactly. This is actually how we started our relationship, so it's
Yeah,
great.
right. So it just felt like a have to have this conversation with you.
Yay. I'm excited that you asked me.
Yeah. So I was just going to like kind of do a big picture think on the Enneagram and have you weigh in. And then we can take it further to these lines and these arrows and things and what works about it and what doesn't work about it, if that feels like a good combo for you.
Cool.
And then whatever else happens. So, as you know, and others know, I spent like a good 5 years of my life reading everything ever published about the Enneagram as a part of my PhD work. And I brought like one of my 4 research journals of all things Enneagram. Yes, I waste trees. I like to print them and touch them. I have highlighters and it's color coded, and because that is how I like to touch things. And so it was a helpful exercise for me in my PhD work, in addition to my Enneagram teacher training certification, because it just reiterated what is known and what is unknown about this tool. And I think the thing that I get frustrated the most, that I stand on my soapbox the most, is that we treat the Enneagram in like sort of modern pop culture and modern teachers. We teach the Enneagram like it's a empirically tested theoretical framework. Maybe something like cognitive behavioral therapy, where every person can come in and we sort of use the model in the same prescribed way and we get results, right? And that is just not anywhere close to what the Enneagram is capable of doing. And so I just would love your thoughts on that sort of like big picture, I think, flaw or nuance that is missed in a lot of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there it is a tool that is so um, fluid in terms of like everybody's coming into it in a different place. Everybody needs something different out of it. Um, you have to really think about the layers. Like this is, my soapbox that I get on is like type even, you have to think about the layers of identity and, you know, um, neurodiversity and, all these social identities that we have and, uh, even things like a type 1 wants to be good. And it's like, okay, what defined good for that person? It could be religion. It could be a parent. It could be a whatever. Like, and
Yep.
so it is not formulaic at all. And so that's the important piece, right? And the whole idea that like all these books were written without a lot of representation. And so even just the information that's out there on type isn't really fully indicative of like humans' experiences either.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's really whitewashed. It's really Western. It's really like the lens under a capitalistic society, right? Like it's so narrow who traditionally has been teaching about the model, and we sort of get that view of it. And like, what the research can show you over and over and over again is that the Enneagram is a tool that doesn't have a standard of practice, right? It has a bunch of different people who have ideas or concepts or models or modalities that are like, this worked for me. I took this philosophy and I tied it to attachment theory or spirituality or corporate leadership, but we have yet to, as a international Enneagram community, come and said, these are the components of the model that we believe are the most helpful, and they're tested and can be used to be expected to be used in these ways. We just haven't done that. And so in that, you get a lot of nuance, you get a lot of opinion and perspective, but it lacks the like, this is fact. And unfortunately, a lot of the modern teaching teach it as this is fact, like you move this way in stress and this way in health, or whatever the thing we want to pull apart. And I just want to acknowledge that George Gurdjieff, who was a Russian philosopher in the early 1900s, is said to have appropriated the sort of core foundations of the Enneagram from Middle Eastern spiritual teachings and spiritual traditions. And we aren't really sure exactly where it comes from in its roots in Sufism. Is it, Afghanistan? Is it Turkey? Like, we aren't really sure. But what we do know is that's not his original work. And then, as he brought it into the Western world, various other teachers that have followed him have added their own flair and their own spin to it. So we're trying to take a, sort of indigenous to Middle Eastern culture tradition and really shove it through a Western lens. And so I think just holding that too is really important when we go into like the rules that people say are true or untrue.
Yeah, and it makes me think too, right? When we take something from traditional roots into Western culture, it does kind of require it to become more formulaic because that is what people seek. And it will, it's one of the things that we'll talk more about, but like, people really want things to provide them with answers. And, and so like, if it's like, hey, it's this thing, you can use it however you want, and it's like really fluid and there's no like definitive this or that or whatever, it's like, people won't get it, it's like,
Yep.
it doesn't compute.
Yeah, and that's such a fair assessment of like, how do you take it and make it usable without losing sight of the humanity that it's trying to hold. And that's like the pro con, and exactly why you're the right person to have this conversation with me.
And of course, like Western culture took it and like it's now Western culture took it and it's now a tool to fix yourself. It's like, of course, great. That was probably not where it started.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to talk specifically about the arrows that live within the model, right? So if you've seen the Enneagram model, it's got all of these lines that make up all of these laws and sort of teaching tools, right? Like resources that we can use as we are expanding our human experience. But particularly at some point, someone along the way added these sort of rigid experiences of I point from my type to another type in stress, and I point from my type to another type in health, right? So now there is, or integration and disintegration, right? There's all these ways that we've made it our own language. But we've essentially created a binary where there's a good experience of my type and a bad experience of my type. So tell me a little bit about your relationship to these arrows, how you learned about it, what you think about it. All your opinions I want.
Yeah, well, okay, before I do that, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the lines, because the lines and the arrows are two distinctly different things. The lines are an intrinsic part of the Enneagram,
Yes.
but not to be used as arrows necessarily, right?
Yeah, good point. And maybe I'll put a little graphic on at some point. So this is my pretend graphic. But when you look at the model, there are three catalysts for the lines. One being the circle on the outside, right? It sort of connects all of the 9 types. Then there's a triangle in the middle that connects the type 9, 6, and 3. And then there is kind of a star shaped in the middle that moves from the type 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7 back to the 1. And each of those 3 are considered laws within the Enneagram. They teach us something about ourselves, they teach us something about others, and they are meant to sort of hold a map within the model of, what's possible or what's our potential in our human experience. And so they're, from the perspective that we've seen, they're closed lines, right? It's a closed circle, and they're not open-ended. They sort of connect and end within each other. And at some point, someone added arrows into it to give it some directional movement, not the fluid movement, right? So here we are going into the formulaic experience. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that uh, the lines or the arrows themselves, like I think with anything, my general perspective is often if it is helpful and it helps you learn something about yourself, great. I love that for you, And so what I hear is often, and this, I think, the Enneagram Institute, right, and the wisdom of the Enneagram have this type goes to this type in stress, this type goes to this type in growth, right? That is like, it is written in there and it's like written as fact, right? And so a lot of people see it that way. Like I was in a workshop with a team just this week, right? And somebody's like, oh yeah, my type goes to, my type 3 goes to a 9 in stress and a 6 in growth, right? And which one do you move toward? And so they're like wanting to have this conversation, and I think it makes it too prescriptive, right? And they're like, well, what do you think about the arrows? And I'm like, again, I think here's the thing. If for me, like when I first learned these things, right, before I really started questioning a lot of things about this framework, I'm a type 3. In this framework, 3 goes to 9 in stress and 6 in growth. And so what I took away from that was actually it was insightful for me to think about when I am overwhelmed, I do narcotize or numb out or veg out or like whatever, right? I want to like not feel it and disappear from the world and like become one with my couch, right? And so I was like, oh yeah, I go to the 9 in stress. Like that makes sense for me. Like I take on the kind of negative coping mechanisms of the 9 when I'm in stress or, disintegration, whatever you want to call it. And so like that for me was like, oh, I noticed a pattern. I noticed something that I do and it helped me name something. In reality, is it that I'm going to 9? I don't know. Probably not. Like I think it's more as a 3 and just as like who I am, like I have felt the need to be on in a lot of situations, right? In a social setting, like I turn on the like, who do I need to be? How do I be shiny in this room? Like how do I adapt? And say only the right things. And, and that, like, that pattern is the type 3 pattern. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, it is exhausting. And so when I am overwhelmed, I want to do nothing but be messy and just like and so I
Yeah.
think, it's like that's the time I get to turn it off. So is it about the 3? Is it about the 9? Like, it really could be either. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was useful for me to think about that in that sense, to notice that one thing, and so I don't, tell people like that, they're a bunch of BS. It's like I kind of do say, like, if
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful for you, but like that is definitely not the first place to focus, not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth place to
Mm-hmm.
focus. Like, focus just on your type. And I do the same thing with wings, honestly, too, because it's
Yeah.
like, is it helpful? If it's helpful, notice something about it. But if it's not, or if
Yeah.
it's just confusing you or taking you away from really the core of like your actual dominant type, then it's just a distraction.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the reality is that, the extra, I think, clarity or the extra language might be a really good starting point for somebody where it's like, well, I've never really thought about what I look like when I'm disintegrating or I'm stressed or I'm pinched or like whatever
Hmm.
language I'll use. And it's like, oh, what would it look like for me who fixates at 7 to embody some of the characteristics of that lower side of a 1? Well, yeah, I can be critical, and yeah, I can be judgmental, and yeah, I can be righteous, right?
Hmm.
So I do think the entry point is really lovely. I think the concept, the theoretical idea is lovely. It's just like, hey, can we take the binary out of it, right? That it's one way, and go back to
Hmm.
the roots of the lines and say, what if we put information around, hey, our job is to get to know our types really well so that we can expand and use all of these other types, right? And you
Yeah.
might find it more accessible to start with the types that you have lines to or that are next to you in your wings, and then what does that look like? Because I hear so many people who take it in our culture of competence, take it as fact, like, oh, I'm only stressed in this way and I only grow in this way. So I
Hmm.
don't even try to deal with my stress,
Yeah.
that sort of low side of 1. I'm not even trying to deal with it the way that a 1 might deal with it. I'm just trying to go into 5. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's not helpful and teaching me that there's some value in my morality and my ethic and my righteousness, right? It's just got to be
Hmm.
wielded well.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've got to practice some harm reduction and manage my own anger and all of those things. So I love the idea of like, okay, let's take the arrows back out and let's just add language in general of like, as a 3, would it look like for you to embody or engage with some of the lower side of 6 and the lower side of 9? Can you recognize that in you?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can see that I avoid, this, or I can see that I get analysis paralysis in these things. Perfect, right? Like, as
Yep.
tools, like you said, beautifully, to just come back to the core and reflect on what's true for me right now. That's how I would love for it to be used.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the point too of like, I mean, really at the end of the day, our work is to embody the amazing parts of all the types, like to
Mm-hmm.
develop that range and how we show up and borrow and use from the types, like in whatever way serves us, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's yeah, it's like we can look to these types, as a
Mm-hmm.
place.
Mm-hmm.
But we can do that even if we don't have a line connecting our type to another type. And actually, technically, they're all
Exactly.
connected because it's a circle.
Exactly.
So,
Yep. So it goes back to that original thing of like, oh, yeah, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just, is it the tool that's helpful for me to come back and see something new about me or something helpful about me?
yeah, yeah. I think when it's also like being prescriptive for someone else, which, like, anytime we're doing anything with the Enneagram or we're putting it onto someone else, our assumptions or
Mm-hmm.
our labels or our whatever, it's like not a good thing at all anyway.
Mm-hmm.
However, um, when I've had like managers that or clients that are managers that are like, oh, my person's an 8, so they're gonna go to, they're gonna go to 5 and whatever. So I think, yeah, I think that's like and it limits the the things that we can notice then, because it's like, oh, well, I do this. So like now I'm not looking for maybe the ways that stress actually shows up for me, or I'm not looking for how I as a 3 when I'm growing. Oh, I am much more about the collective and not about myself or my own image, but it's like, okay, how can we all reach our potential, not just me reaching my potential, right? Like, is that me going to 6? Like, probably not. It's just me kind of loosening my patterns of the 3 and
Yeah.
looking outside of myself in that sense. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, I kind of go back up to the big picture where it's like, ethically, practitioners of the model, leaders within this work, we should want some, you know, uh, consistency or predictability around what is helpful and useful with the model and what's not. And that just hasn't been something that the Enneagram community has engaged in 40 years, almost 50 years of, sort of modern practice. It's been in Western culture since, the 50s, but from 1980 on, we've really ramped it up. And what I see is a tool, this is my personal opinion, getting on a soapbox, but as a tool that is rooted in the ego, is a lot of ego, is that we want to own our own version of it rather than come together and decide what is actually helpful, what is in the spirit of the tool, what is transformational, so that we reduce the harm that we cause. Because that's the thing I see in this sort of misinformation of
yeah.
I have other coaches or therapists or healing professionals who are like, oh, I didn't know that wasn't true, and I'm in a therapeutic or a helping or healing relationship, and I'm coaching this as fact because that is the way that I've learned these other tools. And
Yeah.
so we're perpetuating this harm, and I feel ethically we sort of owe it to that, which is why I think having these conversations is really helpful in lieu of it, to give the sort of empowerment back to us as students to say, I keep what works for me and I leave the rest, because there isn't a one way that we are saying is the safest way through.
Yeah. It makes me think about um, how we just really want to assign things to other things to have an answer like that. I mean, that is like, it's Western culture. It's, I don't know, probably rooted in patriarchy, colonization somewhere, but like,
Yes, yes.
it's like, oh yeah, there's an answer, instead of like, kind of thinking like, people do this with wings too, right? And so I think it's like, oh, I'm a 4 with a 5 wing. Well, that explains why I'm like really analysis oriented sometimes, because I have a 5 wing. And it's like, or you could just like analysis, like, or you could just, like that's another way that whatever, like expressions shows up for you. And, so
Yeah.
it's like, I think people want to put it in a box, have a neat, tidy kind of like answer to things. And so they look to the arrows or wings to kind of explain that, instead of saying like, okay, I'm not a 3 wing too. Like I'm a 3 who wants to be valuable to people, and therefore like the way I do that is by taking care of them or showing up or buying them a gift or cooking for them or whatever. Like it's still me being valuable. It's not necessarily me like being a 2, It's still me being a
Yeah.
3. It's just like how I express the 3ness.
Exactly, exactly. And the behaviors that come back from that, right? And where is it rooted from, and what is the meaning for me as a human, and taking in context my identity and my culture and how I was raised and expectation and all of
Yes.
that. And so
Yes.
that prescriptive approach, as you mentioned earlier, starts to like cut off pieces of my humanity. It doesn't all fit. And so I like this, okay, take what works. If you find the access points of stress and health helpful as a starting point, awesome. Just
Yeah.
don't stop there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, I would say like, what do you notice from thinking about where you go in the arrows? And like, can you actually, do some reflection and bring it back to the core motivations or fears or desires of your type? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of misses that opportunity if we don't, attempt to see, oh, how is this connected? How is this behavior connected to my type?
Yeah.
Because that's the magic and the beauty and the insight of this tool is like, oh, I can see why I'm doing this thing now. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's it, right? And so when we assign it or attribute it to something else, we miss the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about, could we leave the anybody watching this with like a tip from each of us on how to navigate the floodgates of information that's available about a tool, and that also so much of it is rooted in opinion or experience, which isn't inherently bad,
Yeah.
just not, sort of convoluting it as fact. So if you were to leave with like a tip or a suggestion or something that was helpful for you, what would you say?
I would say like your truth is your truth, right? So I think we both have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone a little bit to like really do the reflection and like learn and use this
Mm-hmm.
tool. And if you know something to be true about yourself, then like trust that, even if the book says otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love that. I would say put on your critical thinking cap as you're navigating. Who is this information coming from? Do they represent me well? Do they carry nuance in it, right? Are
Hmm.
they saying, I really believe in the arrows, they've really worked for me, asterisk, you don't have to because it's not, whatever. Like, that kind of teacher or philosopher, like, I can get behind. If there's somebody preaching on a pulpit, and I don't mean that in a literal sense, but like, from an energetic standpoint, and they're just definitive, I would say do less.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, well, thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
I love our chats and our time together. Sandhya and I have been exploring the Enneagram. I've lost count of the years together, and it's made me a better practitioner to have someone in my corner who can critically think with me. So, thanks for being part of my community.
You're very welcome. That's very high praise because I tell everybody like you're my North Star when it comes to Enneagram. Like if I can't figure something out or I need some other insight or I want to toss an idea around. So
Hey, at
I
least all of
appreciate you
those
telling me.
years reading the research is useful.
Exactly. Like the thing is, if you share it with me, you're maximizing your ROI. It's helping.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
mhm.
That is right. So, I love you. You're the
You
best.
too.
No more regrets.